Cracking Crypto is partnered with City Index. Trade shares, CFDs, Forex, crypto, and more with a trusted provider.
Good afternoon and welcome to Cracking Crypto, where we break down the projects in the ecosystem that are changing how we view finance. I'm Andrew Gagan, great you could join us. Well, let's get a wrap of where cryptocurrencies are at price-wise. Now, this is in aggregate over the past 24 hours, but provides a good scope of where prices are sitting. It's looking pretty positive. That's pretty much reflecting the risk-on sentiment that we saw, and that played out certainly on Wall Street overnight with equities. And so there are your top five as they're sitting. Solana, the big mover, up 13%. And Bitcoin has broken ahead of the $38,000 level as that bearish sentiment fades. Ethereum also seeing a rise over the same period. And this follows that coin's worst month in nearly 2 years. It comes ahead of an historically positive February, but plenty of risk remains, of course, but the real returns in the space found with stablecoins, which held their value over the past month, which proved to be extremely volatile. Well, that's the crypto space, but today we're digging into DAOs, Decentralised Autonomous Organisations. A DAO is made up of a network of people who, through code and automation, govern themselves as they collectively seek and attain an objective. Let's break this down. And to do that, we're joined by Alyse Sue from FutrDAO. Alyse, terrific to catch up with you this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, let's start with the very basics of a DAO, of what it is. Is it essentially the democratisation, if you like, of the governance of a company?
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. So yes, it is the breakdown of the democratization of a company, like you said. So for a DAO, we can break it down into exactly what it means. So decentralization means that power is shared by many or all, or versus power being held by a few at the very top. And then for the autonomous part, it's literally about having the DAO's operations or activities governed by smart contracts, which are literally code that sits on a blockchain, such as Ethereum or one of the newer ones like Solana that you mentioned before.
So what this essentially...
And one of the...
Sorry, go on.
I just wanted to say, and one of the beauty of DAOs is that it's literally a community of people working together with a shared vision, working towards a common goal.
All right, so let's look at how this may be formed then. So perhaps you do have a group of people with a common interest come together, perhaps in a chat forum or a chat group of sorts. Then they decide to get to that objective. They pull together capital. That's what's required perhaps to get them there. And they may, for instance, use an Ethereum wallet to do so.
Yes, that's correct. If we broke it down to the foundations, the very fundamentals of a DAO, literally, like you said, it can be a group of people in a chat room and with the ability to vote on some decisions. So do some shared decision making and then ability to pull together some capital, perhaps in a DAO treasury where they can make a shared decision on where to deploy that capital. And it could be towards several different things. So one of them, there are many types of DAOs. So a few of them that I like to kind of break it down into three broad categories. There are these venture DAOs or investment DAOs. So for example, FutrDAO is one of them. You can find us at FutrDAO.xyz. So we are a venture DAO which invests in Web3 radical impact projects. The second category I like to think about is the social DAOs. So you have the friends with benefits. It has received a lot of publicity of late, and they're literally the replacement of your Facebook groups or your traditional meetups. And it's a way where they can get people together as in parties or even just as a shared interest group. And then thirdly, we've got these product or service DAOs, which look after a product on DeFi or some sort of protocol. And one example is Uniswap. But it's very hard to actually categorize any particular DAO because they can operate across different parts of the spectrum. So they can be a combination of all three that I mentioned.
Yeah, Alyse, let's use your own experience as an example then with FutrDAO. Just talk us through then how you actually set this up, how you found those people with a common interest and that ultimate objective that you have.
So both DAOs sort of start decentralized, but the approach that we took was that we started decentralized and then we are now starting to centralize, form a core team so that we can deploy the DAO and also execute on a lot of the DAO's operations. And then eventually, once we've got the foundations formed, we've found our feet, that's when we'll start decentralizing again and giving the power back to the community. So how we originally found this community of people is literally just by reaching out to our networks. So a lot of DAOs do a lot of PR or they do a public token sale, but in our case, we aren't going down that path. And how we are doing it is we're building a small, intimate, tight-knit DAO made up of 100 people or less, where we are going to literally bring people in who we know are passionate about achieving impact and want to work together as part of a community.
What's the price of admission? This is obviously not about just stumping up cash to get in, depending on your objective, but is it essentially using tokens then?
Yes, absolutely. So we are looking at a minimum treasury contribution of about 1 ETH at the moment. That could change. So based on where the community feels that we should go, we will go down that path, just like we talked about the shared decision making. So a lot of DAOs actually do have either a public token sale. So for example, Uniswap has their Uni governance tokens. A lot of the more private ones will probably just ask people to contribute an existing token like Ethereum. So 1 ETH was very popular in a lot of the original and early DAOs. And then you've also got other types of DAOs which ask you to buy an NFT as that entry into that DAO.
Alyse, what is it about, for instance, the Ethereum blockchain and that smart contract function that it has that lends itself to DAOs?
So Ethereum is one of the more popular networks that DAOs launch themselves on because it is one of the oldest, which has that smart contract capability. Having said that, there are a lot of the newer chains like Solana, even Avalanche, that people are launching their DAOs on. And this is really down to the cost of using that network. So there is the concept of gas fees, which are it's fees that accumulate and which are paid to the validators or miners who secure that network and then validate transactions that are on that network. And so a lot of people are migrating to the newer and cheaper ones just because the gas prices have gone up so much on Ethereum because it's become so popular. I have noticed that a lot of DAOs will be or continue to choose to be on Ethereum because there are these network effects that you can access and all these tools which are already existing and very mature for operating and building a DAO.
Obviously, in terms of finance and raising money, this would lend itself also to crowdfunding, which obviously has proved to be a very valid alternative for capital raising. So would this be an appropriate use of that?
Absolutely. There are still some securities regulations to consider in various jurisdictions that you operate in. And because of the very nature of DAOs, which are open to members from all parts of the world, you have to consider the different securities regulations and other regulations that might apply to DAOs. But certainly it is a credible avenue to raise capital.
Yeah, you've taken us to that next question I was going to ask, just about regulation. Let's take Australia as an example then. What is in place? Perhaps what hurdles do you need to overcome to actually establish a DAO here?
I believe there isn't any clear direction around DAOs and what is possible or what is not. But what we can look at is inferring what we are legally allowed to do just based on the existing regulation. So around, for example, company law, legal liability, securities law. So there is a working group, the blockchain working group, and they are working with the Senate on how we can put more regulation around DAOs, but not just DAOs, but Web3 in general, crypto, DeFi, NFTs, etc. And I know Andrew Bragg is very much on top of this, as well as Steve Ballas from Blockchain Australia.
Yeah, I guess it goes to the fundamental being of what a DAO is, that it's challenging or being disruptive to those traditional structures of how a business is established. Alyse, I'm just wondering then what your thoughts are about the future and where this is going, as far as obviously we look at the way a company is structured. It's all about having equity if it's listed. Does this perhaps change that then?
Yes, absolutely. So previously, we would have been very familiar with traditional organizations where you have a management layer and then a layer where you have employees, and then usually you would have equity, which the majority might be held by the initial founders. But in this case, in DAOs, you can actually share a lot of, there's no concept really of equity, but I suppose like shared ownership through tokens normally, where everyone has a vote equals, say, they're all, you could say the crypto equivalent of shareholders, though that word isn't really used.
Yeah, so once again to the future then, as perhaps an alternative to the share market, is that a realistic concept? Rather than holding equity in a company, you're talking about having tokens, for instance?
Yes, so when you tokenize any product, company, any community, well, let's just talk about the share market and tokenizing companies, you create a lot more liquidity. So for example, if you're looking at, say, a startup, especially when you're looking at angel investment or VC funding, you invest in a particular startup, then you have to wait for a liquidation event before you get the payout. But in this case, if we start tokenizing these startups, then you can create a lot more liquidity where you can list those tokens on a centralized exchange or decentralized exchange, and you could literally just trade those and allow a lot more liquidity and trading of ownership between these startups. And in terms of whether it is a rival to the traditional stock market, then I believe in the long term, yes, it will be, because it will be providing an alternative to actually going through all that process of having to list on exchange and finding bankers to take you public. Of course, we'll have to consider the securities regulation around that.
All right, so Alyse, what's your advice then? Where do you start if you want to set up a DAO, be it for, as we mentioned, crowdfunding, for an investment project, or for human resources, even just a social club, I guess, if you like?
So what I would recommend is that you go to DeepDAO. It is a platform which lists a lot of DAOs, and then you can just start researching what DAOs that you might be potentially interested in joining. And then the best way to learn how DAOs work is actually to jump in and be part of a DAO. But if you decide to launch your own, then there are a lot of platforms you can do this, including Aragon, and also very popular tools like Snapshot and Gnosis Safe.
Alyse, terrific. You can talk us through DAOs and the future that holds there, the promise. Thanks so much for joining us from FutrDAO.
Thanks for having me.
And that is Cracking Crypto for today. Join us again, same time tomorrow.
Cracking Crypto is partnered with City Index. Trade shares, CFDs, Forex, crypto, and more with a trusted provider.